throughout the 5 years that I was with the jumpers. Of course, I was in college and jumping during the summer. And I met the Miller twins, and ended up marrying Truth in 1955. And we then went, I didn't finish college until 56 because I had to stop and work a semester for the money. And we then lived in Tacoma in flop houses while I finished up my college graduation in 56. At that time, I had completed the ROTC program, and so I was commissioned in 56 as a second lieutenant in the Air Force. And it was about 9 months before I went active in March of 57 and went through the pilot training and the we called it survival training and water training in Florida, survival out of Stead and in Reno, and then I went into academics at Wichita, Kansas for B-47s, and did the flying phase in Little Rock, Arkansas for the B-47, and ended up at March Air Force Base in California. In 62, everybody remembers the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, the B-47s dispersed from their normal bases, and we happened to go to Northern California at a fighter base, and we monitored the radios and all of that kind of thing, ready, thinking that there's a possibility of going to war. And when the Russians in Cuba shot down that U-2, I thought we were going there. Boy, it was nip and tuck. During that time frame, I had instructed my wife, at that time I had 2 children, instructed my wife to go get a bunch of groceries, stock up on groceries, and be ready to go to northern Washington where the family was. In 68, the wing moved to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, and from there I had a couple of ArcLight tours, which were the 6-month tours over Vietnam. And during the tours, I had 123 missions. In those missions, we were lead aircraft in 65 of them, which meant basically that I had a very good crew. We used to bet, the navigator and the radar would bet that when it come time for the radar to take over and run a synchronous run, that the navigator had to have him within 1 degree of his lineup, or the navigator had to buy the beer. And if perchance that they were right on line at that time, then the co-pilot bought. So it was a kind of a deal that was going on in on our crew. In 1970, I was transferred to Castle, where instructed pilots in the B-52, and in 1974, SAC put up a temporary or a civilian type of operation in Guam, and fortunately I was familiar with Guam, and I thought that it'd be a good place to take the family, so we transferred to Guam in 1974. And at that time, it was a 2-year assignment, and they had R&R trips with the family that from being on the island, they kind of get island fever, I guess. And in December of 70, we went to the Philippines, and my children had a real good time in the Philippines, because the service people on the clubs and whatnot in Guam were all Filipinos, and we had become very friendly with the Filipinos, and we took some Christmas presents to the Philippines for one of those service people, and he had 2 daughters that were 20 and 21, and they just took over my kids and took them to the circus, everything else, which was great. And then in 75 is when the evacuation took place from Vietnam, and we had decided already that we were talking about adopting children, and when the evacuation was taking place, my wife worked down at the hangar in the food line, feeding all of the arrivals that came. And one night, the word went out that there was 2 orphans on one of the aircraft that had came in from the Philippines, and so Trudy started tracking these children, and they were going through the mill, ended up at base operations, and at base operations they were scheduled to go down to Big Navy for the occupation. And I called the wing commander and told him that Navy didn't have facilities for orphans, and that they needed to stay on Anderson. And so we got the 2 or 3 children to stay on Anderson, and Mom took them into the Quonset huts and made sure they had a bed and whatnot. The next morning, she goes into the compound, and it was restricted. You couldn't really go in there unless you had business, that type of thing. And however, a friend of ours happened to be the guard, and so Mom got in. Went to the children, and there were some ladies from the political people on Guam, the governor's wife and whatnot, and they were saying, well, you take this one, I'll take that one, that type of thing. And Trudy said, these kids are staying together. So once more, they called to the wing commander, said we need to take those kids out to our quarters. And so we did. We took the 3 younger ones, they were 8, 10, and 12, on a hammer seat to our quarters. Boy, was that an experience, because they didn't speak English and we didn't speak Vietnamese, and they did not have all kinds of facilities like the washing machine and all those kinds of things that when the 12-year-old girl discovered the washing machine, Mom had to try, because she was washing everything, putting it in the washer just to watch it go. And So anyway, we kept watching for the family name because they were from a big family. And finally, the family name showed up on a roster to be at Navy. So we went down to Navy to see if we could find them. And where the Navy was logging the people in, you see the Vietnamese, the last name is first. And so the Navy logged it under their first name alphabetically. And of course, we're looking for the family name, which we couldn't find. And finally, just out of chance, I looked under the first name and we found them. And so they were supposed to be in such and such a row, such and such a tent, and so forth. So we go on to a roadie point where the Vietnamese were all in tents, and that particular section hadn't even been bulldozed yet. It was all jungle. So we didn't know quite what we were going to do, and Mom grabbed a big piece of cardboard, put the last name on the cardboard, and stood at the first aid tent, just holding it up. Pretty soon, shoom, a bunch of kids chip, 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 jabbering away, pointing, and then they, shoom, all disappeared. And then, shoom, here they come back with an elder, and the elder worked as a nurse assistant with the Americans and spoke English. And as it turned out, he brought all of the birth certificates and everything for the family. And we found, went to the family, and the boy that was 14 was real close to the three younger ones. And then the next boy was quite a bit older. He was almost 18. And so we, well, you know, what difference would one more make? So here we got 4 Vietnamese children, all from the same family, of course, and got them on Guam, and it's amazing how rapidly children learn. Of course, we sort of had an influence on that. We wouldn't let them fight unless they fought in English, so we knew what was going on. So after supposedly it was a 2-year tour, and so I got orders to go to Rome, New York, and we were in the process of adopting, and so we didn't want to really leave Guam until that process was finished. So I extended for 2 more years, and that was really good because that fall was when Rome, New York had the big 20-foot snowstorms. Telephone poles were off, laying down, and I'm thinking, boy, what an expense it would have been to buy parkas and all that for all 7 kids. Was we had 3 of our own. And so then in 78, we transferred, 78, we transferred back to California. And one of my sons started going with a girlfriend, and she had a youngster, 6 months old, and they didn't have any way to take care of him, and so we were babysitting Corey for a good bit of the time. And so we said, well, his mother saw the stability in our family and asked us to raise him. So we got guardianship in 1985. We had guardianship on Corey. At that time, he was 9 months old. So that gave us a family of 8 children, and the from that time we moved, or I retired in 1985 and moved back to Washington, and went to work in a car dealership for a while, and then I worked for the Bangor base in safety, and then I got a job with the state as a safety officer, and worked for 10 years with the state. In 2001, Corey graduated from high school, and I said, that's time for me to retire again. So we retired, and we've got children and grandchildren scattered now quite a bit. California, Texas, in Michigan, in Kentucky, and I think that's all. And so I do a lot of traveling up and down the coast, because most of them, well, I don't say most now, half are in California and the other half we visit as we can. And so big family is something that people really don't realize, that how important and how much fun it really is. Because you never, well, first of all, they all fought like cats and dogs, but they protected one another as a group, and so you always knew what was going on. And with a big family, you never had to worry generally where your kids are, because there's where all the action is. So all the onesies and twosies come to your house to stay, play games, visit, whatever. And so you don't ever have to worry about your kids being in trouble, because there are always lots of activity going on at home. And we finally ended up completing the adoption on all of the children. Initially, we had a problem with Jimmy, who was 14, because by that time he was older, and the U.S. did not allow adoption at that age. And so we were in a quandary, because we were going to have to get him a green card to get into the United States. Excuse me, United States. And fortunately for us, in '78, I think it was in February, the U.S. changed the rule to 16. And when they did, zap, we got him adoption, so that all of the Japanese or Vietnamese children were naturalized citizens when we came back to the United States. I might mention that one time during, must have been probably '76, I'm thinking, we came back to the United States on leave. I might mention that one time during, must have been probably '76, I'm thinking, we came back to the United States on leave. And of course, here we've got these 4 Vietnamese children, and at that particular point, all we had was hammer seat. We had them still signed out on a hammer seat, and here we coming back, flying on an aircraft back into Hickam. Now getting through customs is a problem, and here we are with these 4 kids, a hammer seat, and of course their birth certificates. We brought those with us, and it was kind of a hassle. Pretty soon they just go. And so we took the kids up to Washington and met the rest of the family. In that trip, we went through Highway 20, which is in North Cascades, instead of going the normal way up to Columbia to the central part of Washington and Winthrop. And we got on the top of the pass going over the North Cascades, and there's snow. And the kids had never seen snow. So we had a vacation sort of stay while we're sitting there. They're sliding down the hill with on the snow that's still on the pass. And then the trip back was almost as hectic getting back to Guam, because we got a flight into Hickam and in Hawaii there, and to get an aircraft that has 9 seats space available was kind of difficult. So we were stuck for about 2 weeks on Hawaii trying to get back to Guam, and then all of a sudden there was an aircraft that opened up with 9 seats where we could get everybody back on the aircraft going to Guam. During that time, we were staying at in the quarters at Hickam, and on the north shore there were some big waves, lots of well, what do you call them? The waves that did come in every now and then, did supersize and whatnot, and so they were warning everybody to stay away off the north shore. And while one day, there was a big wave come in and come clear up over the road, and it drowned about half a dozen people or so. I can't remember the numbers, but out of the casualties, the most of them were female. And so in our family we discussed why were there so many females that were victims versus males. And the only thing that we could come up with was that they screamed. And if they screamed, they lost their air when the wave hit. And so we said, okay, remember this. If you ever get chucked over with a wave, hold your breath. Don't scream and let the breath out. Well, we were at another beach in this same time, and the waves, my son and I and Robin, a girl, went out over the waves on boards, and they got tired and decided to come back in because it was nice and smooth out there. But you had to time it just right to get in so you wouldn't get hit with a wave. And so I timed the deal and said, okay, kids, now. And we took off swimming. Well, I and Randy get in, turn around, Robin got scared and she stopped and went back and then started again, and that put her behind. And I turned to see exactly where she got into, where she was standing up, and there was about an 8-foot wave right over the top of her. And I yelled at her to take her breath, and I saw her gulp her air. The wave comes boiling in, and then I'm out in the water there trying to find her. Where's she at? And I turned around, and that wave had turned her over and over and over right up onto the beach, and she still had her mouth closed, still had her air. So Mom was the one that ran over and grabbed her, and I'm out in the water yet because I couldn't believe, but that wave was that strong, rolled her right. So we didn't go out on there anymore on that trip. But there was a lesson that we as a family talked over, saved ourselves probably a death, because I'm sure she would have screamed and not held her breath. And so anyway, this is all in the past. Of course, then I retired in 1985 and went, as I mentioned, back to Washington.